Well, friends, Donald Trump returns to the scene of the crime and is warmly received by congressional Republicans, including some of his own criminal associates. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, there seems to be at least some consensus regarding Donald Trump's return to the U.S. Capitol. Let's start with the Daily Beast. Trump returns to the scene of the crime and the GOP cheers. MSNBC, returning to the scene of the crime, GOP welcomes Trump to Hill. And this from The Guardian. Headline, Pelosi condemns Trump's Capitol visit, returning to the scene of the crime. And that article begins, Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic former House Speaker, mounted a forceful denunciation of Thursday's first visit to the U.S. Capitol by Donald Trump since he incited a mob to attack it on January 6, 2021, accusing him of returning with the same mission of dismantling our democracy. In remarks that triggered a fresh war of words between the pair, Pelosi said the former president's visit to discuss strategy with congressional Republicans in advance of the election amounted to a symbolic return to the scene of a crime that he, Trump, deliberately initiated. Quote, today, the instigator of an insurrection is returning to the scene of the crime, Pelosi said in a statement. January 6th was a crime against the Capitol that saw Nazi and Confederate flags flying under the dome that Lincoln built. She added, it was a crime against the Constitution and its peaceful transfer of power in a desperate attempt to cling to power. And it was a crime against members, heroic police officers and staff that resulted in death, injury, and trauma that endure to this day. But friends, you don't just have to take the word of Democrats. Let's have a look at what one of the leading Republican voices of the day had to say about Donald Trump's return to the scene of the crime. This from Liz Cheney. Mitch McConnell knows Trump provoked the attack on our Capitol and then watched television happily as his mob brutally beat police officers and hunted the vice president. He knows Trump refused for hours to tell his mob to leave, and even then, with police officers bleeding, he kept repeating his election lies and praising the criminals. He knows Trump committed a disgraceful dereliction of duty and is a danger to our republic. Trump and his collaborators will be defeated, and history will remember the shame of people like Mitch McConnell, who enabled them. You know, friends, I've often asked the question, how can there only be two Republicans, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, only two Republicans who care more about the health, indeed the viability of our democracy, than they care about their own reelection? How can there only be two? Only two with the courage and the patriotism to stand up for the American people, to stand up for American democracy, to stand up to Donald Trump, who is now a convicted felon. And while we're on the topic of felons, you know, we still have insurrectionists in Congress. People who are trying to kill our democracy from within, some of whom just warmly received and applauded the insurrectionist in chief, Donald Trump, for his triumphant return to the crime scene, the U.S. Capitol. I mean, just look at these characters. Marjorie Taylor Greene Matt Gaetz, Scott Perry, Mo Brooks, Louis Gohmert, Andy Biggs, Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, the nefarious nine. 9 people who asked for presidential pardons in connection with the insurrection. Why does somebody ask for a pardon? Because they knew they committed crimes on and around January 6th, and they wanted to get away with those crimes. You know, friends, take it from this old career prosecutor. Usually, I did not start a criminal investigation with a confession from the target, from the suspect. Usually, we would start by being notified a crime had been committed. We would investigate the crime. We could see if we could identify the perpetrator. If so, we would present the evidence to the grand jury. If there was enough evidence to ask the grand jury to vote out an indictment, we would obtain an indictment. We would arrest the person who had been indicted for the crime. We would Mirandize them, and if they waived their right against self-incrimination, we would interrogate them in hopes that perhaps they would confess to their crimes. That was typically the end game in a criminal investigation. When it comes to the nefarious nine, we already have the confession, the request for a pardon, which the Supreme Court said, albeit in dicta, not the holding, but still instructive language from the Supreme Court in 1915 in a case called George Burdick versus the United States. The Supreme Court said, pardons carry an imputation of guilt, and acceptance of it, acceptance of a pardon, a confession of it, a confession of guilt. So we've got the confessions from the nefarious nine. All we have to do is fill in the facts with an investigation of the crimes the nefarious nine committed that prompted them to ask for presidential pardons. We've got to do better. We've got to enforce the laws of our nation against everyone, including the powerful, the privileged, the influential, the connected, folks like the nefarious nine, not just against the powerless, the poor, the disenfranchised, those folks with no voices, no connections, no influence. We've got to do better. Because justice, equal justice, matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.